Her Majesty the Queen has asked me to form a new government, and I have accepted. Today, the government is asking the Office of National Statistics to devise a new way of measuring well-being in Britain. There is a link between what politics and government does and people's happiness, contentedness and quality of life.
True lasting happiness is the enlightenment experience.
Well-being is more what we're talking about here rather than just happiness. Happiness can be quite fleeting.
The issue is, if you say to most people, what does happy mean? They think it's about feeling happy in the moment.
So there's a whole industry emerging of how to enable people to flourish. Well, in whose judgment?
On May 6, 2010, the Conservatives came back into power after 13 years of a Labour government, with a little help from the Lib Dems, of course, with big plans on how to get the country out of the recession. Some moves by the government have been bold and caused controversy. Raising student fees, proposed reforms to the structure of the NHS and police, not to mention care homes for the elderly, cutting benefits, trying to change job seekers, well, the list goes on and on. But in November of last year, Prime Minister David Cameron announced his most radical move of all by getting Britain's GWB up. That's right, general well-being. So, what is general well-being? He says, and I quote, "It's time we admitted that there's more to life than money, and it's time we focus not just on GDP, that being gross domestic product, but on GWB, general well-being." He continues, of course, "Well-being can't be measured by money or traded in markets. It's about the beauty of our surroundings, the quality of our culture and, above all, the strength of our relationships. Improving our society's sense of well-being is, I believe, the central political challenge of our times." So wait a minute, Dave. So you're saying that most of us have to be happy, or all of us have to be happy, even though we don't have any jobs. We can't better ourselves because at uni we need lots of money to pay for our tuition fees. And how do you get money if there's no job out there? And you also propose to change your benefits and how the job seeker allowance will work. So adding more pressure to get a job and holding on to it. Otherwise we have no money and this is getting a bit confusing. So let's refresh. I believe I need money to be happy. I need to pay for all the necessities in my life, such as food, clothes, electricity, gas, water bill, heating, my iPhone apps, accessories, holidays abroad. What? Those aren't necessities. But that's what makes me happy. So what is the remit for this documentary? We consume too much and this is what makes us unhappy. Really?
Yes.
But buying things is the only pleasure I have. So there's more to life than owning loads of possessions.
Yes.
You serious? Well, what? On May 25th, 2010, the government set up a survey to measure people's psychological and environmental well-being. The Office of National Statistics will collate these findings and create a well-being index. Findings are due to be published at the end of this month. That's July. So David Cameron is really trying to find out what he can do to make us happy.
Let me be very clear, yes.
Perhaps he can do with a little bit of advice. Perhaps a little bit more investigation. My name is Mark Finlay, and I am on a quest to find happiness.
Happiness hit her like
Hi. In case you can't remember, I'm Mark from earlier. I think I should tell you about myself. I'm a film student, and I have a bit of a problem. I love movies, DVDs and Blu-rays, and as you can imagine I have quite a big DVD and Blu-ray collection. What you might not know is that I have so many that I've lost count. That's just a glimpse. The rest of the storage facilities are out of order, so you cannot see them. Do these make me happy? Yes. Am I genuinely happy? I'd have to go with no. Let's take that now and have a look at consumerism and our general well-being. Dr. Sandra Carlisle is a researcher for Glasgow University. Over the years, she's investigated matters of health, well-being and social inequalities throughout Britain.
Well-being is spoken about in 3 different ways. There's our immediate hedonic or subjective well-being that we might call happiness. What makes you happy at any one moment, the things we enjoy. The next level is subjective well-being in the sense of life satisfaction. So that means that it's invoking your memory and a more global judgment of how your whole life is going. So those are not the same things. And some researchers say we should focus on one, some say we should focus on the other. And there's a third level as well, used by Martin Seligman and people like that, who say that we should look at what Aristotle called eudaimonic well-being, which is human flourishing and fulfilling your potential.
So what is consumerism?
There is a difference really that seems to have occurred since about the 1960s, where our society has changed its focus from one that focused on production of stuff to one that's mainly focused on the consumption of stuff. And there's all sorts of subtle changes that have happened there. For example, in earlier times, your position in life was really determined at birth. You knew who you were, you were born to the son of a peasant, you were going to be a peasant. But in modern times, it's up to us to decide who we are, and the choices are overwhelming and confusing. And one of the ways that we convey our identity to other people is through consumption. And the other aspect of consumerism in modern society is that the power of advertising and marketing to make us dissatisfied with life and to hold out the promise of happiness and well-being through consuming whatever it is they're offering, that is an incredibly powerful influence that we underestimate at our peril. We really like to be doing better than those around us. And there's all sorts of thought experiments that demonstrate that. It's not just about keeping up with the Joneses. We want to do the Joneses down.
So, how do we judge happiness?
You or I are the only judges of whether we are happy in the moment or whether we think our lives have gone pretty well. But if we're going to talk about human flourishing and fulfilling our potential, then that opens us up to the judgment of others. So there's a whole industry emerging of how to enable people to flourish. Well, in whose judgment? What does this flourishing consist of?
Taking this comment on board, I wanted to try something new to see if it would make my happiness flourish. And what better way than trying the latest craze, a fish pedicure. Firstly, I get my feet washed to get rid of salt debris I may have obtained from the course of the day. Time to brace myself. I'm going in.
We're going to have screens. So some people like to keep their heels in, but if you feel comfortable, just pull them all the way back.
It's weird, it's like what one an escalator, not an escalator, but a vibrator.
Yeah, a lot of people say that.
but I wasn't so sure if this feeling would pass. But thankfully, it did, and I was starting to relax. The purpose of this fish pedicure is to exfoliate the dead skin cells on the surface of the feet, and whilst it is a little strange now and then, in the next 15 minutes my feet should be beautiful like new. It is also supposed to help relax and rejuvenate the mind, making me happy by releasing endorphins. And voila! I now have smooth soles and I'm on cloud 9. But the novelty soon wears off. So what now? Time to get inside the ideal of well-being.
That's me just in Edinburgh to do my first session with point coaching with Chris and Helena. It's going to be very interesting. Never done anything like this before, and hopefully set me on a good path to find happiness.
I'm Helena Alder,
Yeah, and I'm Chris Alder.
and we've created point coaching together just as a vehicle for integral coaching here in Scotland. I think happiness is possible, but it's also like an attitude you live with. It's like, how do you actually approach life? How do you what are your everyday actions that you take to actually contribute to yourself and to others and to the world?
So, how do we get to it?
Facing the difficulties and going into the pain and through the pain, and not just saying, oh, I should be happy all the time, but actually when things arise and things are difficult, to actually face it and deal with it and go through it.
Well-being is more what we're talking about here rather than just happiness. Happiness can be quite fleeting. You know, I get a new car, great, I'm happy. A week later, I'm not so happy. But yeah, that sense of well-being, that, you know, I'm living my life the way I'd like to be living my life. There's no blockages or barriers that are stopping me living my life. Yeah, I think it's about direction in life. I think that's quite a big one for people out in our society at the moment. People are feeling quite lost and directionless.
So, why do people feel so directionless? Chris and Helena have a 2-part coaching session that will be used to see if they can drive my focus.
It can be anything, and that's the purpose of the first conversation as well, to really nail what's important just for that person. And that can have any variety of flavors to it. So I think there are some sort of patterns of like relationships or work or direction, or which again is like implicit with happiness, because there's some sense of unhappiness that something's not quite working.
Chris begins by explaining what we will look at during the first session.
Cool. So this one we kind of call the intake conversation. I'm going to try and take in as much as I can about what you want to work with. And I'm going to try and approach it from as many different angles as possible. This is integral coaching, kind of like life coaching, but more inclusive, we try and say. So I'm going to try and include all of you, every sort of angle I can come from, to really trying to find out what it is that's there, that's holding you back.
I had a chat with Chris for 40 minutes. As time passed, I was interested to know, how exactly do they make up the programme?
The important thing for us is to actually make it specific to the person. So there's no generic answers, there's no right way or there's no wrong way, there's just what's important for you, what is it that you want to work with.
We mentioned the word unique in our website quite a lot because it has to be, in a way. Even the metaphors. You know, there's no book of metaphors we use or anything. We just really feel into that person. What is the metaphor that speaks to them?
Chris and Helena used different methods to write up the individual's programme. I was curious. What were they able to do for me?
There's a structure of the method that we're following, but there's not a specific right answer again. So you would just adjust it to the person as you go along.
I came back the next day to discover how I thought about things and how I could change.
So here today I'm going to offer a couple of different metaphors, as I explained. First metaphor is, it's not about you, it's not trying to say this is you, it's trying to say this is how I see you've been approaching it up until now. Or your current way of approaching it, your current way of being. And then we're going to look at sort of a new way you could approach it. So, topic. I think we nailed it yesterday. I didn't change it in any way. I felt like that was exactly what you wanted to work with, which was, I, Mark, want to believe in myself and my abilities. And what really came to me was this sense of almost like this passionate father figure, this passionate father that really wanted, you know, his son to do well, and had really high expectations.
Sounds just about right, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, really that, you know, as long as I perform to 100% or beyond, then I'm worthwhile.
time for the new me.
This is where I really want to introduce a different metaphor, like a different way of doing it.
Right.
And the metaphor that came here, bringing those elements of play and lightness, a bit more lightness and fun. I had the way of the inspired kid's toy inventor. You've got this drive, it's like you're inspired, but you're a kid's toy inventor. It's not so serious.
Yeah.
And as an inventor, you can't get it 100% right straight away, can you? You don't know what the kids want to play with, so you create something, you give it to them, and you see what happens.
Yeah.
And then you take it back and you refine it.
As me and Chris sat and chatted some more, I began to realise how the pressures I put on myself could be resulting in my discontentment. I want to be more inspired, and certainly Chris's toy maker idea was sending me on a new path.
That went really well, really enjoyed it. The 2 days went really well. I think progressed really well as well. I was really happy with Sage, it wasn't, when you hear metaphors you think it's going to go a bit haywire in a sense, but no, it seemed to really resonate. It seemed to really resonate with what he was telling me, or what I had told the day before, and I really agreed with it. It was similar things than what I thought before, but it's definitely a different way of looking at it as well.
While self-help coaching was great to help me move forward with my aspirations, I had to believe there was more to life than a career. I wanted to explore my spiritual side, and what better way to do that than at the Glasgow Buddhist Centre. Come with me now as I begin the path to enlightenment. So Joe, how long have you been practising Buddhism?
I first came to this centre about 2.5 years ago. But my practice of meditation and ethics, it didn't really get going. It wasn't really solid until about a year ago. I was looking for ways of being happy that were less dependent on the external conditions of my life, As I learned more about the Dharma, that's the Buddha's teaching, as I learned more about that, and as I gradually practiced more, and my meditation became more enjoyable and more meaningful, and I began to see it having more and more effect on my life.
So, what is Buddhism?
Well, the goal of any Buddhist is enlightenment. That's the Buddha's experience, and it's difficult to kind of explain what enlightenment is. We don't really understand what enlightenment is. It's said that an unenlightened mind can't actually conceive what an enlightened mind is. It's impossible. But we need to have an imaginative connection with the goal. I think true lasting happiness is the enlightenment experience. The Buddha said, I teach suffering and the way to end suffering, and that is all. That's all it's about. So you would say that complete happiness is the complete cessation of suffering.
So how do we meditate?
I think any meditation practice focuses your mind. The ones we do are the mindfulness of breathing, metta bhavana, and just sitting. The mindfulness of breathing is the one that's certainly most obviously focused on developing concentration, increasing your ability to focus.
Is consumerism bad for the soul?
It's not bad in itself, it's your relationship to it, I think that if you have a kind of consumer type mentality, you're reinforcing that tendency towards craving, or greed as we call it. You're searching for happiness from something that can't give you happiness. Although we can enjoy things when we get them, it never lasts. I think it is a big obstacle, consumerism, to true happiness. I think it is a massive obstacle, because there's an endless amount of things that you can consume. It's a real source of suffering, because you can never get enough. It's like the law of diminishing returns. The more you get, the less satisfaction it brings. Whereas I think the spiritual path, getting to know your own mind, has the opposite effect. It's like the satisfaction you experience is augmentative. It gets better and better. It doesn't diminish the more you have of it, it actually increases. The way we mostly experience life is ups and downs. But if you do things, that are really good for you and really nourishing for you, you tend to find you have more ups and less downs. So what's to say if you didn't continue that and take it all the way that you'd end up with just an up, no downs. And that is the Buddhist teaching.
The meditation was very calming, and I started to realise that to be happy, I need to start thinking positively. So I've been doing some research, and there is one person who keeps popping up, and his name is Martin Seligman. Now, he is a professor who has been looking at what he calls authentic happiness and how it can be measured. His main expertise is an area called positive psychology. Now, the interesting thing is, he's changed his idea of what he classes as happiness over the last 10 years. He now does not like the word happiness, and instead speaks of how we should flourish. So I have arranged a meeting with Dr. Carol Craig, who is the Chief Executive for the Centre of Confidence and Wellbeing. She's going to chat to me about the problems of concept of happiness.
Well, positive psychology really is a movement. It's a kind of set of academics, but with a wider following than that, who started off really trying to rebalance psychology. So Martin Seligman, who was one of the leaders in his field, had an epiphany, he says, where he realised that his profession was half-baked, that they had only really focused on what was wrong with people and on negative emotions. The issue is, if you say to most people, what does happy mean? They think it's about feeling happy in the moment. And this is what Seligman has now realised, and he has changed in the way that he's using these words. So for example, in Authentic Happiness, he is talking about happiness. Although he's defining it as meaning, he's still using the word happiness. In his latest book called Flourish, he actually says at one point, I actually detest the word happiness, which he says is so overused it's become almost meaningless. And he also says, and I agree with him in this, for the general public, the word happy means buoyant mood, merriment, good cheer and smiling. So people think it's about being happy, right? And that, I think, is fraught with dangers. One of the reasons why I was really attracted to Authentic Happiness is, I think, is quite a typical Scot. There was an element of me that really felt there was something about the modern world that was far too materialistic, and that principles mattered more than that. And one of the major challenges of our time is, I think, parents are becoming incredibly indulgent. And they think it's really important that their child is happy in the moment. And if they're unhappy because you're not giving them money or a telly in their room, or that micro skirt or high heels or whatever, I think that they're overly concerned about that. That you're trying to get pleasure in life, you never get there. And that's partly because as human beings we have a phenomenal capacity to adapt. So you might think that if you get that new car or that new kitchen or that new house, it will make you happy. And lots of people do think that kind of thing, that it will make them really happy. But actually, if they get these things, within a very short period of time, they cease to really matter. They're just accepted as part of their life. Right? So it's just my new kitchen, it's just my new car. And it no longer has the capacity to make you fulfilled or happy. You're now on to the next thing that will maybe make you happy. So you can see how with consumerism you don't ever particularly get there.
So, why buy?
That a lot of the value of consumer goods for people is not so much the goods, but where it places them in a status hierarchy. So it's about keeping up with the Joneses or doing better than. And again, if that's the kind of world you're living in, you never tend to get there because there's always someone else with more stuff or a better phone or whatever.
How will the policymakers gauge what well-being is?
Life satisfaction studies have been shown to illustrate that when people answer these questions, what it's capturing is a mood, how you're feeling that day or at that moment. So it's quite transitory. And so is that a good basis for public policy if what you're doing is moods. But I think that, you know, for me the big thing about politics is that there used to be some sense that politics was about the good society and that parties were setting out ideas for how we might achieve that. And they were leading people, if you see what I mean. Whereas what has happened to politics is it's become about consumerism. We've got focus groups, we ask the electors what they want, right? So it's become like business in many ways. And of course, if you think about it, what might suit you might be different from what suits me. And shouldn't we be trying to appeal above basic self-interest to the future or what's good for the community? These kind of things. So I actually don't think, until there is a movement, I think, within the country and within people themselves, I don't know that the politicians or the public policy people can do an awful lot about it.
Over the last few weeks, I've tried to discover why we, as a nation, seem to be so unhappy when, let's face it, we've got it pretty good compared to others in the world. We have running water, central heating, roof over our heads, access to medical care. I mean, despite how much we moan about the NHS, if you were in dire need of help, you would get it. But for some reason, we look around us and see others with more. We are unsatisfied, and the bottom line for this dissatisfaction, if you've been paying attention, you'll know we are compulsive consumerists. We have this idea that by buying status we will be happy, but sadly this is not the case. So David Cameron needs to take some radical action to stop this, and to be honest, I don't know how he's going to pull it off. Britain needs its public to spend so we can become financially stable again. But if you push well-being forward, Dave, you should really be saying, stop buying things you don't need or can't afford. From what I've learned, happiness comes from contentment within, and not outdoing George next door. It's about interacting with people and giving them your time. So, Mr. Prime Minister, I wish you well on your journey and hope you find the solution to stop Britain consuming happiness.
Happiness, happiness, the greatest gift that I possess. I thank the Lord that I've been blessed with more than my share of happiness. To me, this world is a wonderful place. I'm the luckiest human in the human race. I've got no silver and I've got no gold, but I've got happiness in my soul. I got more than my share of